Hi everyone, I'm Liz Henderson, Director of Edge Women, and I'm so excited you've joined us tonight for Season 3 of Refuel and Recharge. Tonight's episode is on a topic that I personally care a lot about, mental health. Recently, I've realized that I struggle with anxiety, and I know I'm not alone, as more people than ever before are also wrestling with that, depression, and many other things due to the state of the world that we live in. So if you're watching tonight, my hope for you is that you realize that you are loved, you're cared for, you're supported, and you can find the help that you need. Tonight, we'll be chatting with Sissy Goff, along with hearing from many other women on their own journeys with mental health. But before we get started, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Ann O'Brien, who will share with you a little bit about what Edge is.
Thanks, Liz. On behalf of everyone here at Edge, we are so thrilled that you have tuned in tonight. I'd like to take a moment to tell you a little bit about Edge and how to get involved. Edge is a nonprofit organization that focuses on whole person development, which includes personal, professional, and spiritual growth. We're based in Indianapolis, but we have participants from all over the country that get involved, and we encourage you to join us. There are several ways that you can get involved, and one is Edge groups. We pair 5 to 7 young professionals with a more seasoned leader who serves as a mentor. These groups meet every 2 weeks for a year as they walk together through personal, professional, and spiritual growth. The next is Edge at Work. We take Edge's proven mentor model and we bring it into the workplace. Companies can select their emerging leaders to participate in this cohort-based program, and they can learn curriculum through personal and professional development. And lastly, it's Edge events. You're at one right now. So thanks for joining us, and we hope that you continue to join us at our virtual events, but also our in-person events, which we are so thrilled to continue getting back to in 2021. We encourage you to learn more about Edge and consider participating at edgementoring.org.
We recently had the opportunity to go to the little yellow house that helps people in Nashville, Tennessee, otherwise known as Daystar Counseling Ministries. Daystar is dedicated to providing support, encouragement, and compassion to children, adolescents, and families in need through counseling. Today, we'll sit down with Sissy Goff, Director of Child and Adolescent Counseling, where she'll chat with us about what anxiety and depression looks like and how you can help both yourself and your child. Sissy, it's so good to be with you today. Thank you so much.
To be with you. Yes, of course.
I have to tell you, I got one of your books and I read them, and I saw that our good friend and Edge board member Carlos Whitaker wrote the foreword to Raising Worry-Free Girls. And as I read it, I thought he was talking about me. And so I thought, this is someone we need to talk to and to hear your story and everything. So thank you for your time today.
I'm so delighted to be with you.
Yes. Well, you tell us, who are you and where are we? This is amazing.
So I am the Director of Child and Adolescent Counseling at this place that is Daystar Counseling Ministries. And we are a little yellow house. One little boy called it the little yellow house that gives hope, which I love that. And we see kids here from about really 3 or 4, or the youngest, up through 18, and then of course families. And we have 15 counselors on staff, 5 dogs who are a part of our therapy practice, and 1,900 families currently that are coming for counseling.
Wow. Okay, so talk to us. We were talking earlier about how mental health is becoming something normalized that we're talking about more. Yes. Whereas growing up, we never talked about that.
No, we sure didn't.
So talk to us a little bit about what you're seeing today and why families are coming to you.
Well, we see kids for every reason imaginable. We have kids whose parents are getting divorced. We have kids who've gone through any kind of trauma imaginable. We have kids who are struggling socially. We have, really everything, depression. And now we have so much anxiety because the statistics, it's interesting. Probably about 5 years ago, we wrote a book called Are My Kids on Track? And the statistics there were 1 in 8 kids. Pre-pandemic, we were at 1 in 4, with girls twice as likely. And now we're 1 in 3. And so it just keeps marching up. Wow. So, I would say now 75% of my practice specifically with girls is probably anxiety. And the boys would say a little bit less, the men on staff, I shouldn't say the boys. They would say a little bit less, but it's so prevalent. So, but really, I always say if you scooped up a group of kids from any school or homeschool co-op across the country, those are the kids we're seeing.
Wow. Okay, so you say 1 in 3 girls are struggling with anxiety.
Yes.
And so I had dinner with girlfriends the other night, and I went around and I said, I struggle with anxious thoughts. And I'm just curious how many of you do too. And 5 out of the 6 of us said that we do. And before, I think there was a sense of shame and admitting that.
Yeah.
Do you find that kids are more likely to share that they have anxiety opposed to their parents?
Yes. And I think you alluded to this before. I think we just weren't talking about it. I mean, I'm a lot older than you, but when we were growing up, we certainly weren't having a feelings chart. We were passing around the dinner table saying, name 3 feelings,
Right.
We just weren't talking about that stuff. Whereas now I think families are doing a phenomenal job of addressing those issues. And so kids do come in and they know how to name it. And I have seen in the last year, even more kids who say, Mom and Dad, will you take me to counseling? Which is so exciting to me that kids are asking for help now. Because I couldn't have asked for it. I didn't even know it existed when I was growing up. So I think we're marching toward mental health in a really great way. There is one byproduct of that I get concerned about with kids. And I used to would have said it's adolescence, but it's getting younger and younger where they will come in, they will tell their parents they want to see somebody, and they'll come in and say, I have anxiety, or I have kids. Sometimes I'll have kids use, so many counseling type things have initials. Have you ever noticed that?
Yes.
Yes, it's so funny. And so I'll have kids say some initials that I think, I don't know what you're talking about. But they'll Google, they look up different things, and they're diagnosing themselves, because I think now that we are using this language in a beautiful way, it also, with everything, there's a blessing and curse. And so kids are using those words to define themselves. And so they're saying to their friends, I have anxiety, I have depression, I have PTSD. We talk a lot around here about how kids don't say anymore, I want to run away from home. They say, I want to kill myself. And kids as young as 8 are doing that. And so the language has gotten so much bigger. And so we talk a lot about with parents how important it is to use feelings and to talk about those words regularly around your dinner table, but not to let kids define themselves for any of us. I mean, if we have anxiety, that's not the most defining part of who we are. It's a part of who we are, and it's a part of what we're dealing with, but it's not who God made us to be. It's not. And so I think with kids, we want to help them see they're so much bigger than that, and that they're stronger than any anxiety that's going to come their way too.
Yes. What captivated me about your book was it's written for parents, right?
Yes.
And so you minister and serve children here, but you say you start with the parents. And I find that fascinating because I'm a mom of 2 little girls.
Yes.
And when I was in the 2nd grade, a substitute teacher told me that I was a worrywart.
Really?
And I thought, you know what, you're right. I am a worrier. And so it stuck with me my whole life. And I never realized it was actually anxiety that I was struggling with until it was actually diagnosed when I was in my 30s as a mom.
Yes.
So my question for you is, what is anxiety and how do you diagnose it, and how is it different from worry?
That's a great question. And in the book, I talk about this kind of continuum from fear to worry to anxiety, because all of us deal with some degree of those. And, fear kind of goes away when whatever we're afraid of is gone. Worry is a little bit more pervasive, and we worry about things in the future or the past typically. But worry comes and goes seasonally or with situations too. But for anxiety, the way that I characterize it is, and obviously I work primarily with kids, so that's kind of the language I use, but I always talk about with kids, it's like the one loop roller coaster at the fair. And we all have thousands of intrusive thoughts every day. And I'm driving across a bridge and it might pop in my head, I hope I don't run off the bridge. But if I have anxiety, I'm going to think, oh no, I'm really going to go off the bridge. I'm going to go off the bridge, and I can't get it out. I mean, I remember, I think the first time I ever really realized that was what was going on for a child, she came in my office and she said, bless her heart, she said, I'm so afraid of cheating. And she said, I was sitting in school the other day and I ended up telling my teacher I was cheating. And this little girl was so honest. I mean, she was such a rule follower. And I said, you told her what? And she said, well, I was sitting there and I kept thinking, don't cheat, don't cheat, don't cheat. And I glanced at my friend and I thought, oh no, I'm about to cheat. And then I looked at my friend more and I thought, oh no, I cheated. And it just got bigger and bigger for her, to the degree that she went up and confessed to her teacher that she cheated. And I don't think she ever saw an answer. But that's what she thought was happening. And so those intrusive thoughts just get bigger and bigger and stuck. And then we can't even see it rationally at that point.
Wow. No, that's so good. you talk about when a child comes to your office, you also talk to the parents.
Yes.
So talk to me about that. So if I were to come to you and say, I think my little girl is struggling with anxiety, can you help her? You'd probably start with me, right?
I might start with you, yes.
Okay, so tell me.
Well, the way we do it here is if you were to bring her in, I'd bring her up first because it's real important to us that the kids feel like this is their place more than their parents. So I always want to connect with the child first and then the parent. And anxiety in particular, I mean, a lot of things reside in the whole family and not just the child, but I think anxiety in particular does. And if as a parent you have anxiety, your kids are 7 times more likely to deal with it themselves.
Wow.
And that is no shame on parents. That's just genetically. They're 7 times more likely. Now, I do think there are other factors contributing to it. And one of the things is I think there's kind of an offshoot of the fact that we have become so much more understanding of our emotions that I'm seeing a lot of parents who are, well, I'll tell you, statistically, the 2 most common strategies with anxiety are escape and avoidance. And that's not just for kids, that's for us too. When we feel anxious, but of course, as a parent, you don't want your child to be in distress. And so they come upon this thing and you want to pull them out. And in the book, I talked about how anxiety is an overestimation of the problem and an underestimation of themselves or ourselves. And so when we pull them out or when we pull ourselves out, we're furthering the definition. Yep, it's too big. You can't do it. And so with kids, I think getting parents on board for your kids are going to have to do this scary thing. That's the bottom line. They're going to have to work their way towards it. It's so important for parents to be able to help kids practice doing those things. And anxiety, I read so much when I was getting ready to write those books. One of the things I read that was interesting was that anxiety has no memory. And so for any of us, when we get really anxious, we forget the things that worked yesterday, and kids especially. And so helping parents work with them on, remember, this is a time to take some deep breaths. This is a time I want you to use the grounding techniques you've been talking about with Sissy or whatever it is that they can go back to it. So yeah, we want to help the whole family heal and not just the child.
Well, Sissy, I know we probably have a lot of women who are watching today, and maybe men too, and they're starting to think, okay, my child or myself, I might have anxiety. Yeah. What tips do you have for them, and what can they do? Where do they begin?
Well, I would say the great news is anxiety is the most prevalent condition among kids, and it's very prevalent among adults too. It's also the most treatable. And there are really practical things we can do. I mean, cognitive behavioral therapy is the most widely researched type of therapy for anxiety, and it's really practical. And so I usually have a top 3 things I do with kids in my office. So
Tell me.
If I was meeting with you for the first couple months, these are the first things I would do. So for any of us, when we get really anxious, we have blood flowing all throughout our brain. When we get anxious, the blood vessels in our brain constrict, and it shifts the blood flow away from the prefrontal cortex that helps us think rationally and manage our emotions, and it goes to the amygdala. And the amygdala is the fight or flight region of the brain. And so when parents will sit down and they'll say, my child is like a crazy person, or we feel like a crazy person, it's because the part of our brain that thinks isn't even getting blood in that moment. And so we can't do anything else until we calm our bodies back down. Wow. So the way that I do it with kids, you can do it with me, is I call it square breathing. With boys, sometimes we'll call it combat breathing, but I do it. I mean, if I'm about to go into a situation, I feel anxious, I'll stand over to the side and do square breathing. And the cool thing is people don't know that's what you're doing. And so
how does it work?
You literally draw a square on your leg. And with each line, you're going to breathe a different way. So like breathe in, hold in the corner for 3 seconds. Breathe out, hold in the corner for 3 seconds. Breathe in, hold in the corner, and 20 seconds of deep breathing resets the amygdala.
No way.
20 seconds. So that means you can think rationally again, and then you can do the other things. And the cool thing about drawing on your leg is that also is a grounding technique, because anything sensory related is grounding. And so what I would do first is get their body calm back down, and then we want to get their mind out of the little loop, or we want to get our mind out of the loop that we're in. And so if we think about the senses, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So if you were in my office, I'd make you do this with me right now. So I would say, tell me 5 things you see.
Okay.
And you would
look around the room.
Yeah.
Okay.
Pick 5 things. Tell me 4 things you hear. Tell me 3 things you feel. Tell me 2 things you smell. And 1 thing you taste. And to do that requires
focus.
A lot of focus. so funny. Yeah, it requires a lot of focus. And so that's what we're wanting them to do. I mean, we can also think of everything. We can find that's a certain color. We can do math. I have teenagers, or sometimes, count backwards from 100 by sevens, anything that requires focus. And then the third thing that I think is one of the most important things is naming the worry, because that voice that we all have in the back of our head, we think is true. And so when we can give it a name, it takes away some of its power. And then, I can say to one of my friends, worry has been bothering me a lot. The worry monster, or with the teenagers, I call it the worry whisperer, or whatever name. I had adolescent girls that just named theirs things like Agnes. It doesn't matter what name. But I think I had a girl who said, my friends have been saying to me, I think Agnes has been bugging you a lot. And for somebody to walk that journey and understand with us, because so often they don't, that I think to name it makes it easier to describe and easier to fight. Anything has less power when we name it.
Hi, everybody. I'm Adrienne Evans, and I am the Director of Marketing for Parallel Design Group, and we do residential and commercial interiors in and around the city of Indianapolis. I am also a wife to Austin, my husband, and most recently and importantly, a mama to Ember. And part of my story in mental health, it's dated back a super long time. Ever since I was in about junior high, around 12 or 13, that's kind of when I remember feeling just the most anxious, and really when anxiety kind of took a hold. And so just have been working through it for decades and decades. I think it is something that I hope will not be around forever, but I've definitely over the past couple of years just really focused in on it, and been able to identify some tools and some resources that are helpful to me. Over the past, I would say 5 or 10 years, anxiety has kind of manifested in a different way for me. So I've seen everything from and experienced eating disorders and perfectionism, and just being completely into obsessive compulsive ways of life, and it's just really ripped a lot of joy from my life. There's just been a lot of things through anxiety that the Lord has taught me, and I'm grateful for. Some of the things that have been super helpful in my journey have been just being super open and honest with my community. So just a community of sisters, a community of coworkers, and through church as well. So those things, just being honest first with myself and with the Lord, and then also just with others around me, that's really created an accountability system that has been helpful for me throughout this season of anxiety. I think that there are a lot of negative thoughts around medication, and in specific seasons in my journey, I do think that medicine was good for me and it helped. And for me personally, the goal was to not be on medication for my entire life. It was to utilize tools and resources and basically just a different way of living in order to get past those anxious thoughts. Something that also has been helpful is to physically move my body. For me personally, I feel like I'm on this treadmill that just won't stop, and I don't even want to be on the treadmill, but I'm on it. And so something that is helpful for me is just practicing physical practices such as yoga or Pilates or going for a run with a friend. All of those things have been super helpful, just incorporating those things and making time and space for those within the day. Other spiritual practices that have been helpful to me dealing and coping with anxiety have been meditation, journaling, and worshiping have been super impactful in my life. Specifically taking time to do those things each day, really setting the tone for the day. For me personally, I'm a morning girl and early bird, so just getting after that first thing to start the day and really allowing those things to set the tone for my day has been helpful as well. If anyone that's watching this is struggling with a mental roadblock, whether it be anxiety or depression, the first thing I think is to just be honest with yourself and to be honest with people that you trust. So whether that's your spouse or a community group that you're involved in, or trusted coworkers and people in your workplace. Maybe it's your a mentee or a mentor through Edge Mentoring. It's just important to be completely honest with yourself and to not be ashamed of anything that you're going through. Another thing that I think is helpful and was helpful for me in my journey personally was just seeking out therapy and making time for that. My hope overall would just be to embrace your journey honestly and with vulnerability. And the sooner that you share your struggle with others is when the healing will begin.
Sissy, so this is your dog, Lucy.
This is Lucy, who helps me counsel kids and families every day.
And how old is
she
Lucy?
She's 12.
12. Oh my goodness.
Yes.
So let's talk about what role does Lucy play in your clients here, and what role do pets play?
Well, I would say so many kids come nervous, sometimes angry to counseling. And so when she does that she was doing to you a minute ago, I call it her wave. I mean, it's just disarming for so many kids to be greeted by a dog. We actually have a lot of families who will say, is one of the dogs here? Because that's the only reason I could get my child to agree to come.
Wow.
And so it makes such a difference. And I'm such a believer of dogs, maybe cats, in the lives of kids too. Over the years, I cannot tell you how many kids I've had say things like, well, the only person I really talk to is my dog.
Oh my goodness, that is so sweet.
And I think things are so hard socially to have somebody in your house that thinks you're the greatest thing in the whole world.
Yeah.
Is just a gift in and of itself. And so they're very important around here. We've got 5 of them.
5 of them. Are
Yes.
they all different sizes, breeds?
They're all different sizes and breeds. Yes, we actually have 2 Havanese, but
Wow.
all the rest are different.
Oh my goodness. Well, it's a pleasure to meet you, Lucy.
She said the same. Good girl.
Oh, we're glad you could join us.
We're going to let you go off camera for a little bit and do your own thing. You can go counsel someone else.
So, Sissy, let's talk a little bit about depression. I found in society today, a lot of people will casually say, oh, I'm so depressed.
Yes.
So what is the difference between depression and sadness, and how do you realize the feelings are sticking around longer than they should?
I mean, a couple of things. One is, I would say, depression is basically sadness that never lifts. That you start to go do the thing that you used to really enjoy and you don't enjoy it anymore, that those things don't make you happy. And I think it's sadness that's hung around for quite a long time. And really, from a chemical standpoint in our brain, what happens is we have these synapses, these nerve endings, and we have serotonin firing across the nerve endings, and it stops when we've been sad enough for a long period of time. And that's when we become listless, when we lose interest in so many things. Our energy level drops. We sleep more, we eat less, sometimes we eat more. It goes several different directions, but someone I heard compare it once to the flu, and I think it feels like that from a physical standpoint and an emotional standpoint. You just don't have it in you to do the things that you need to do, and I think we're just more emotional in those seasons of time. But there's not the predictability, and often we can attach sadness to something, and depression we often can't. But I think I heard someone one time say depression is like anger turned inward, and I think that's sometimes what it can be too. That it has its roots more in that.
That's so interesting that you say that. One of my questions too about depression is, it's so easy to tell our friends, like, snap out of it, just get over it.
Right.
So, and obviously that's not helpful.
Never helpful. No. And I think anxiety too. I mean, I think it's easy for people to say, oh, you shouldn't feel that way. Whatever it is we're feeling that way about. And it is really beyond our control. And I think it's so important, if it's something we're going through, to educate the people that love us too. Even though that's hard. I think, the older I get, the more I learn, we really do have to advocate for ourselves. And sometimes with the people who love us the most, because they're just not going to understand. And so for us to explain how it impacts us is really important.
Wow. I've often heard that if you haven't experienced anxiety or depression yourself, you do not understand at all what it feels like. And so therefore people can be afraid to admit it. So what is the best way, if someone thinks that they're struggling with this, to explain it in a way that those around them would understand and be motivated to help?
You know, it just popped into my head. I think it'd be great to show them the movie Inside Out and say, that's the person that's living in my head the most, whichever one, sadness or fear. But I mean, you're right. I think so often they don't. And I mean, when I meet with parents of little girls with anxiety, it's so interesting. The words they use the most are manipulative and controlling. And I think they think negatively about those kids because they believe it's in their control when it's not. I mean, they can't help it. And I think for so many of us, control becomes our coping strategy when we don't have other options. And so that's what we move towards. So, I mean, I think explaining the brain chemistry piece of it, if you can educate yourself a little bit and then educate them on that, because it's harder to argue with the serotonin's not firing anymore or the amygdala is taking over and hijacking our brain. I think when we have something like that we can use to explain it, to say, I really don't have control over it in these moments and I've got to get help. And if you need words, you know, from a counselor or from a psychiatrist or from a book you've read, I think take some of those things, have them read books with you to understand, because the folks who love you want to learn and they're going to want to help you too. And it's easy to I think automatically assume that they might not.
Yeah.
But the truth is
What are some natural ways that you can boost your serotonin levels if you think they've stopped firing?
Yes, that's a great question. I would say going for walks. I mean, anytime we're outside exercising, that is a great way to boost our serotonin level. I think pets make a huge difference in that. I mean, really doing anything that you love. I read a study about smiling, what a difference that makes. Also read that avocados can help too.
Avocados?
I mean, there are all these interesting things.
Well, I don't like those, so I might need to start liking them.
Start having some guacamole. Yeah. So I mean, there are a lot of different things we can do to boost serotonin. I mean, and I think we've got to think about. You know, I feel like we're talking culturally so much more about self-care, but I just think it's never been as important as it is today for us and for kids both. But if as a parent, if you have kids who are struggling, you're likely not going to be doing it yourself, and it's so important. And even if your kids aren't struggling, I think as a parent, as a mom, you just can be so busy that you don't end up doing those things and taking the time for yourself, and it's so important.
Definitely. What role do you think faith plays throughout all of this? I feel like, I know I shared with you earlier that I think one of the devil's biggest tactics and goals is to keep you feeling shameful about what you're going through and not admit it and bring it into the light. And so I guess, what freedom have you seen kids experience when they name it and they say what they're going through? And how has God been a part of their journey, maybe along the way?
You know, I'm going to say this in such a wacky way, but I think I'm thankful for the pandemic in light of that, because I was really worried going into it about kids' faith, and really ours in a lot of ways, because I mean, the verse I anchored those books to is John 16:33 about, in this world you will have trouble, but take heart, I've overcome the world. And I felt like we were getting to this place where I think the emotional and the spiritual lives of kids were going like this, instead of there being any union of the two, which obviously we want our faith to inform our feelings, and it just wasn't doing that. And I think we were a part of the problem, not only just the public in general, but I think the church. I mean, I feel like all of the dumb hashtags about living my best life and the best day ever, and we were doing that as we've gotten so image conscious in so many ways. And so I think for kids, but I also think for us, because of that, when we would hit hard times, I think that deepened the shame.
Yeah.
Like, I can't, nobody else is going through this because I'm only looking at their highlight reel. I'm not seeing that in other people. And so I don't think we knew how much Jesus really could meet us in those really hard places, because I don't think we would open them up to the light, like you said. And I'm seeing a real difference in that right now, which I'm so encouraged by. And I've heard more kids clinging to their faith specifically than I ever have. And I think us too. I mean, I feel like, gosh, there have been days in the last year that I think, I'm not really sure what other direction to go but that one, because I need it so desperately. And I think I'm so grateful for that, and that that we have a God who redeems all things. You know?
You mentioned social media and that it's so easy to compare ourselves to everyone's highlight reel. What are some basic principles that you encourage moms of daughters, or people in general, that would be good to follow for their mental health?
Breaks. I mean, I think that's one of the biggest. I would say taking regular breaks, whether it's one day a week or a week out of every couple of months, or just whatever you can do to get off of it sometimes. I think that's one. I think to be really careful the accounts you follow too. And if an account does that to you specifically, just stop following it. And I think with kids, for parents to talk to them before they ever get on it about how it's going to impact them. Like, let's talk about this. You're not only going to be seeing the highlight reel of other people, but you're going to see every event that you're not invited to. You're going to see every time when you get on Snapchat that they're in that bubble, that you're not in the bubble with them. And I want to talk about how are you going to feel when that happens? How are you going to respond when that happens? Because I think they're not prepared for that so much of the time, and it just blindsides them. And I think it's increasing the comparison, and it's increasing loneliness a lot for kids. And one of my biggest rules of thumbs, that's not even how you say that, whatever, however you would say that, with families is that you don't want to be the first to let your kids have all the technology things. You don't want to be the last, because the first is going to be perceived as fast. We don't say that anymore, but you know, the last, often they're going to try and buck the system and sneak it anyway. So I tell parents to be the next to last because then you're on the conservative end and you hold them off as long as possible, but you're not the only one because they're going to feel like they're the only one at some point.
Hi everyone, my name is Juanita Molano Parra. I am an MBA and engineer turned life and leadership coach. I live in Indianapolis. I've been here for the last 4 years, but I'm originally from Colombia, from Bogota, where I spent the first decades of my life. I only within the last 2 years had heard the word depression for myself. It was something that my latest therapist brought, and it's actually something that I think I've been dealing with since I was a teenager. It just hadn't been called like that or hadn't been labeled like that before. I think sometimes people avoid putting labels on those things because of fear, because of how it may land, because people may feel worse, or I don't know, any sort of those things. But the reason that I want to put that in here is because for me, the experience of having that label was more than that, was the experience of having a name for what I was going through. And so this is really part of my message or my hope for you all through this, is that you know that this really is normal. That is the thing. And that, I think, is the power in having a name for it and having a name for the experience that you're having. Depression can look in many, many different ways. If you look at me, if you interact with me, if you have seen me before, you probably wouldn't guess that I go through depressive experiences. And I do. And it's actually entirely part of who I am and entirely part of the relationships I have and what I've built. I actually don't think I would have made the transitions I've made if that hadn't been part of my life. I want you to know that depression can look in many different ways, that depression is normal, and that depression is something that you can get supported by. It's not always easy, that I will tell you too. When I was preparing for this, one of the questions or one of the things we were thinking about was what gives me hope. And what came to me most was love, which sounds very fluffy and ethereal, but love in many different ways. I think love from the people around me, which when I am going through depression, I tend to push them away really hard. So the love of me, the love and the understanding of what I'm going through to really stay there and keep supporting me. The love of something bigger than me. I really get kind of grounded or get to come back to who I am when I see things that in my mind don't make sense. You can call them miracles, you can call them magic, you can call them wonder, but seeing the trees blooming after they've been bare for 6 months, or seeing the universe and galaxies and stars, because that makes no sense at all, or thinking about pregnancy, because that really makes no sense at all. So all these things that when you see them remind you of something bigger, of God, of wonder, of magic, of those things that are beyond what you can understand. The last thing I would say is love of myself, for myself, within myself, because one way or another, that piece of love is what has me reach out for help when I really need it. Be it to my partner, be it to my sister, be it an emergency call to my therapist, can you see me now? That type of love is the one that has me actually see my therapist consistently or reach out to any of the other supports that I may have. And so it is kind of cheesy, it is kind of ethereal, but it is, I think, a crucial element of hope is that love everywhere.
Hi, I'm Kristi Blackburn, and I am a physician assistant who became a stay-at-home mom, and now I do an online wellness course. And I'm also the co-founder of a ministry called Nothing is Wasted Ministries with my husband, David Blackburn. And my passion in life is to empower people to take back their health. And it all started when I realized that there is a healing power of food, and it came from when I was a health and wellness coach at Eskenazi Hospital, downtown Indianapolis. And they hired the Center for Mind Body Medicine, this organization that took us through an 18-month training. And they were talking about how food is medicine and actually how we should treat our patients with food instead of drugs. And that was actually not even a novel idea, because when I was in school, most of the first line treatments were lifestyle modifications and choices like diet, exercise, sleep. When I started going down that path of holistic wellness, I realized that God actually created our bodies to heal themselves. I realized that we were loading our bodies with toxins, but God created these pathways to actually detoxify our bodies as well. But then over time, the more we've been eating these toxins, eating these types of foods, it was creating this chronic inflammation that was going into preventable diseases and creating chronic diseases as well. And with that standard American diet, the issue as healthcare providers is when these patients are coming in with these preventable diseases, we're doing them a disservice by just giving them medication and not providing lifestyle modifications and creating a side effect platter of all these other preventable diseases that they're gonna go down along that path. I felt for the longest time I was putting a Band-Aid on symptoms and not actually discovering the root for them. It's easy as healthcare providers to tell people what you need to do, but I think the proof in what we believe in is if we actually apply it to our lives. And so there was a season of my life right after I had my third child that I realized I was going through postpartum depression and anxiety. And that was a hard pill for me to swallow for someone who's this Enneagram 7, fun personality, can find the joy in anything, and all of a sudden everything lacked its luster. I had no interest in anything. I didn't find joy in anything. There were days that I didn't even want to wake up. And honestly, there was points where I didn't even want to live anymore. And so to get to that level of your mental health and realize that you were shaming yourself for so long for even feeling these negative feelings, and you get to the point of not even wanting to live, there's a problem and there's an issue. And as a mental health provider, I could have done the tools beforehand. And because of shame, I allowed my pride to get in the way. And so after I realized that, I knew I needed to take the right next step. And one, it was admitting that I had a mental health issue. Two is talking to my husband about it and letting him know, hey, we need to start taking the right next steps for me to get help. And so when I started going down that path, I said, my husband asked me, what do you need to do? And I said, I need to do the tools that I know what to do and I've taught my patients. So the proof of me now knowing as a medical provider that these things work is taking that and applying it to my own life. And so the things that I did, and this would be the things that I would recommend to everyone watching today, is first I realized that what does God say in Scripture about your mental health? Because I feel like that is where shame can be put on us. In Philippians 4, it talks about do not be anxious about anything. So it'd be easy to say, stop being anxious, Kristi. And I did that. I said, why are you being anxious? Are you not a follower of Jesus? You should be able to get rid of this. Give it to the Lord. But nothing was changing. And I realized I didn't keep on looking through that verse even more and keep on reading it. It says, with thanksgiving, present your requests to the Lord. So with Thanksgiving, that's practicing gratitude. And that's in the 8 dimensions of wellness. It's a foundational skill. So I realized I needed to take Scripture in its entirety and the whole, and now apply those to my life, and even take the psychology practices with the 8 dimensions of wellness and apply those to my life. So one of the first dimensions of wellness that I started going into was the physical aspect of it. And that for me was just getting enough sleep. So with a newborn, with homeschooling 2 children, I knew it was gonna be hard, but I made that a huge priority. And there's no way you can get 8 to 9 hours of sleep, but making that more of a priority. Then the next thing I started doing was trying to find any ways I could just to exercise, to get outside, get that vitamin D and exercise. And so whether it was taking my newborn on a walk, bringing my 2 kids along on a bike ride as well, I was trying to get my body moving. And then the third thing, I thought I was eating whole and clean. I was teaching people how to do that. And I realized realized there was lots of foods of inflammation that I was eating. So I knew I had to take that fully out of my diet, and those were gluten, dairy, and sugar. And that was like the key to make my mental health start getting clear. The brain fog was lifting. I was getting more energy throughout the day. And that is what I would fully recommend for you. There was a guy I met at the 18-month training that I went to that I talked about beforehand, and his name was Dr. Drew Ramsey, and he was a nutritional psychiatrist from New York. The psychiatrist took 111 inpatients who were suffering from severe depression and anxiety, and they actually looked at their microbiome. So what your microbiome is it's in your gut, and it has this mind-body connection with it. And so the microbiome is a lot of good and bad bacteria, and they looked at the bad bacteria in there, and they realized that patients who did not get better, who did not heal from their depression and anxiety quick, were the ones who actually their microbiome was suffering and lacking and had a lot of bad bacteria. But the microbiome that was the richest and the fullest and was the healthiest, those were the patients that remitted the quickest and had consistent remission with their depression and anxiety. And so we're now seeing that really your mind-body connection is one of the healthiest things that you can do, that everything that you put in your mouth will affect your mental health. He was saying that he was actually using these same foods that caused inflammation in the body, causing these autoimmune disorders. It caused inflammation in the brain as well. And what you could do is take away those foods of inflammation, but also add in brain food. That's seafood, avocados, leafy green vegetables, cruciferous vegetables, broccoli, nuts and seeds. And all of those foods actually are gonna make your brain get not inflamed and create better mental health for you. So now that I talked about all these different dimensions of wellness, I'm talking about physical, spiritual, getting sleep, your diet, your exercise. What I've noticed with myself and with my mental health patients is that there's no energy to do that. When you're suffering through depression and anxiety, when you're suffering through mental health issues, it feels overwhelming to know everything you have to do. But the biggest thing that you can do is the next best step for you, the right next step, the most simple step. So whether that is just changing something in your diet, whether it's getting a little bit more sleep, if you're able to do that, you're able to partner with God to take back your story, to take back your health, and live a life of meaning and purpose and get your joy and your health back. I believe that there are practical and tangible steps that you can do to take back your health. And all you have to do is do the right next step for you.
One of the things I really love too, well, actually, I keep saying one of the things. I've loved everything you've written, and I felt like it was written to me personally, you know, to everyone who reads it. I'm sure they're thinking about themselves. They read it for their kids, but they're realizing this is speaking to me. And so let's talk a little bit about why you wrote this, why you wrote Raising Worry-Free Girls, and why you wrote Brave. What was your mission behind it?
Well, I didn't necessarily mean to. The publisher asked me to after reading something in Are My Kids on Track? And I think all of a sudden I started connecting just how prevalent the anxiety was I was seeing. And I think, you know, it's so interesting to me that we're talking so much about empowering girls, and I feel like I'm watching girls have less of a voice and less confidence than I think I've ever seen them have.
Wow.
And so I think not only, I mean, I joke and say I wrote these books to work people like me out of a job, and I was trying to put a lot of practical stuff that they could do at home, but I think biggest picture, I think if I had to say what my life's about, it's helping girls find a voice and figure out who God's made them to be and step into that. You know, not in an arrogant way by any stretch, but feeling confident in the gifts that God's given them, because it's about Him giving them gifts. It's not about them anyway. Yeah. And so, I mean, I think to me, the more we can connect with that and who we are, I think the less anxiety is going to bother us anyway. Yeah.
Sissy, I read page 33 last night, and it has just stuck out with me so much. And it's such a beautiful portrait of how you painted women and girls who are struggling with anxiety, and something I've never heard before. So I want to read it, and then let's chat about it. Okay. So you say, "Let me tell you what I say to every girl facing anxiety. You feel this way because you're really great. The smartest, most conscientious, try hard, care about things girls I know are the ones who struggle with anxiety. It's honestly because you're awesome. You care so much, and that's the bottom line of why you worry." And you say, "The girls I see who live with anxiety are some of the most hardworking, caring, intentional, kind, brilliant girls I know. things matter to them. Everything matters to them, which can make life hard. And it can make it hard to know when or how to turn that kind of care off. I think we so easily view anxiety as this massive problem, but you're saying it's the girls who really care that are the ones wrestling with it. So let's talk about that. That's empowering to read.
Girls. Well, it's so true. And I don't know that I would have ever put it together unless I'd been counseling girls. And I mean, as you're saying that, I'm just even thinking about sitting here in my office and a little girl who sat opposite me not long ago. And she was here because she was so anxious, and she was, you know, top of her class. She was trying so hard. They're the kids that the teachers say, I wish every girl in my class was like your daughter. And and they're amazing kids, but it's hard to turn. They see everything. They're processing all the time. They observe so much, and they're trying so hard to connect and please and be their best selves, and it just gets exhausting, and they can't do it. And so often those kids also don't know how to say, I felt hurt when such and such happened, or I felt really angry. But it is something I'll say to kids, and I was picturing this one little girl that I told that to recently, and she said, yeah, that is me. You know, which is so great. And whereas the flip side of that is I'll say the same thing to teenagers, and they'll, you know, maybe give me half of a smile. But I think that shift, that is me, to maybe I can acknowledge it, but probably not. I think that stays with us into adulthood. And so we don't see that it's part of our giftedness because we feel like we're not able to talk about that. And I read a study a long time ago that I will never forget that talked about when something goes wrong in a boy's world, he blames someone else. And when something goes wrong in a girl's world, she blames herself.
Wow.
And I think that's part of it too. You know, we just immediately default to something's wrong with me rather than God made me with these amazing gifts. And sometimes I get tripped up in them.
Wow. So your goal is when girls come in here that they leave empowered and confident in who God created them to be.
Yes, absolutely.
So what are some practical tips for people who are watching tonight if they think they're wrestling with anxiety, depression, or their kids are? What would be the next step?
You know, I think I have a friend who said to me, you know, I realized as an adult that when I was growing up, I wish my mom had said, you've got this, more than let me get this for you. And I think if you're raising a girl, you want her to feel like she's got it. Whatever it is, you want her to feel empowered. You want her to feel confident. You want her to feel like God has gifted her with this brain that is brilliant and kind and tries hard and conscientious and cares deeply, and that she can do anything she sets her mind to, and that she's stronger than any worries that can come her way. And I think we want to just keep speaking those messages over her no matter what she's encountering, that she can do it. And obviously we want to help her in practical ways. And I think for us, I really think it's speaking the same kind of truths over ourselves, you know, reminding ourselves how God sees us, that he rejoices over us, he delights in us, and that we can do it, that he has gifted us. And I think we as women downplay our gifts so much. We don't feel like we can even acknowledge them, let alone be grateful for them. And I think that's where I think an acknowledgement of those gifts can lead us to, is a place of gratitude.
So Sissy, throughout this whole series we've been doing on inspiring women, we've talked with some of them about identity and how important it is to define who God created you to be and what that looks like. Jillian Edwards wrote this beautiful song all about defining yourself as who God made you, not in how the world sees you. So talk to us a little bit about identity among girls and how that they can easily find it and what God says rather than what the world says.
Oh, I love that journey. And I think it's such an important one for girls. And I think even as we're talking about mental health, I think all of the things, all of Satan's voice that wages war against our mental health speaks to our identity. And that's the place that I think he attacks us the most. And he knows we're vulnerable, like we've been talking about. And so he speaks lies about who we are. And so I think probably some of it is silencing that voice first, you know, recognizing that voice for what it is. And so being able to separate that out and replace it, you know, that we replace it with the truth of who God says that we are. In the Brave book, I kind of re-explained Proverbs 31 about a woman. And I mean, when you read that, I was reading it through an adolescent girl's eyes. She's amazing. She's a rock star in that verse. And so helping her see God has gifted you in so many ways. And I think sometimes we can say things with like, you're the daughter of the king. And I think for kids, sometimes those things don't land as much because I think they feel so much shame, like we've been talking about. And I think to help them understand that God sees the specifics of who we are and he loves us in those places. There's a quote that we talk about around here a lot by Dan Allender. And he says, you are the only you this world will ever know. And something about you is meant to make something about God known in a way that no one else can.
Wow.
And so speaking to, this is who I believe he's made you to be. This is where I've seen he's gifted you, and seeing those things for ourselves too.
Sissy, our time together today has been so inspiring, I'm sure, to me and then everyone that's watching tonight. So if people want to follow what you're doing in your work, where would you encourage them to go?
We have a website that's raisingboysandgirls.com, and so that's big picture, a place to connect. And then Instagram is probably where I'm most active. So I'm on the Raising Boys and Girls account, but my own account the most, and trying to help just as much as I can folks kind of wander way through this time with everything that's going on.
Hello, I'm Jillian Edwards, and I am grateful to share with you a little about my song Heaven's Eyes today. Heaven's Eyes is a roadmap for me and a reminder for me of who I am and whose I am in Christ. I am a person who seeks a lot of validation and approval in my life. I am hungry for worth. I have a longing to be longed for, and I cannot get away from that desire and that need in my life. And I used to think that that was a desire that I should try and get rid of or push away. But over and over and over again in my life, God has gently led me to his sweet, tender, small, but mighty voice that says that the issue is not that I have that need to have approval and to be validated. The issue is not that I have that need. The issue is where I go to get that need filled, because it turns out that is a God-given desire I have, and I believe he put that need in me because he longs to fill it with himself. So I tend to look for approval and identity and worth elsewhere in my life by earning it, or by looking to successes or failures or other people even in my life to tell me who I am. But Heaven's Eyes is a song that helps me remember to listen to his voice, to the voice of God saying that I am his beloved and I am longed for and pursued by him. And there's really no one else and nothing else that has true authority to tell me who I am and tell me my worth. So Heaven's Eyes helps me remember and come to the place of his kindness and to receive it and to live as the beloved of God. So this is Heaven's Eyes. I'm standing under the waterfall of your approval, and I find that I don't need anything else or anyone else but you. Your mercy's a song that I know by heart, but I forget the words the moment I start to trust anything else or anyone else but you. Show me how to stay here, stay here, stay here. I'll just wait here, wait here. Speak over me, tell me again that I'm someone you love. Let it sink in, tell me a million times who I am in heaven's eyes. So I'm letting go of all other names that I gave myself when I heard you say, come and find yourself in heaven's eyes,
heaven's eyes. So I wanna know, see what you see, past all the versions and layers of me. Nobody knows me like you. A child you chose before I took a breath, every last detail like the back of your hand. Nobody knows me like you. Show me how to stay here, stay here, stay here. Speak over me, tell me again that I'm someone you love. Let it sink in, tell me a million times who I am in heaven's eyes. So I'm letting go of all other names that I gave myself when I heard you say, come and find yourself in heaven's eyes. I am always seen, I am always known, always understood. You call me your own. I am always seen, I am always known, always understood. You call me your own. Speak over me, tell me again that I'm someone you love. Let it sink in, tell me a million times who I am in your eyes. I'm letting go of all other names that I gave myself when I heard you say, come and find yourself in heaven's eyes, heaven's eyes.
Thanks so much for watching tonight. If any of this resonated with you and you feel like you might be walking through a season of anxiety, depression, or something similar, we encourage you to reach out and get the help and support that you need. Know that we're behind you, we're with you, and we're for you. And don't hesitate to reach out to Edge Mentoring at any time.
Thank you for joining us this evening, and a special thanks to Sissy, Goff, and all of our guests as we address the important topic of mental health. If you enjoyed this content and would like to see more of it, I would ask that you consider donating by texting 44321 and entering EDGE 2021 in the message line. Thanks again to all of our sponsors and our partners, and for all of you for attending this evening. We look forward to seeing you again in 2 weeks.